The baby's monitor
Get
screamed
out of here
flatline,
right now.
right as the billionaire pointed at the waitress and said, "Get out of my house." But let me take you back to the moment everything started falling apart. It was 2:47 in the morning when Aisha Okoye heard the first scream. Not the baby, the mother. A raw, animal sound that echoed through the marble hallways of the Whitmore mansion like something being torn apart from the inside. Aisha pressed herself against the wall as doctors sprinted past her. She was holding a tray of untouched tea, ordered 3 hours ago, forgotten the moment the alarm started. She had been invisible all night. That was how she survived places like this. Keep your head down. Carry the tray. Don't ask questions. But as she passed the nursery door, something made her stop. It wasn't the chaos inside, the 14 specialists shouting over each other, the machines beeping in desperate rhythm, Claire Whitmore sobbing in the corner while her husband barked orders at everyone within earshot. It was something else. Something no one else seemed to notice. A smell. Faint. Sweet. Chemical. Like the back room of the textile factory in Lagos where her cousin had worked for 3 years before her lungs gave out. Where 3 people had died before anyone thought to check the ventilation. Aisha inhaled again. Her stomach turned. She knew that smell. She had buried people who breathed that smell. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Excuse me, has anyone checked the ventilation?" The room went silent. Every head turned toward her like she had just spoken in tongues. Dr. Grant Keller, the lead physician, the man whose face had been on the cover of Medical Excellence magazine twice, the man who carried himself like God had personally handed him a stethoscope, looked at her the way you look at a stain on an expensive carpet. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice dripping with manufactured patience. "Who are you?" "I work in the kitchen, sir." "But that smell." "The smell?" He actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a real laugh, the kind meant to make everyone else in the room laugh too. "Ma'am, we have 14 specialists in this room. $15 million in diagnostic equipment. I assure you the ventilation is fine." A few of the nurses exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Aisha's hands tightened on the tray. She had heard that voice before. Not his specifically, but voices like his. Confident. Dismissive. Certain. And every single time she had listened to voices like that instead of trusting what she knew, someone had ended up in a grave. "Sir, I'm not trying to." "What you're trying to do," Dr. Keller interrupted, stepping closer, "is practice medicine without a license. Which last time I checked is illegal." He turned to the nearest security guard. "Please escort this woman out of the nursery. We have a child to save." But before the guard could move, Richard Whitmore pushed through the crowd. If Dr. Keller carried himself like a man used to respect, Richard Whitmore carried himself like a man who had purchased it. Tall, jaw tight, eyes red from 3 days without sleep and burning with the kind of fury that comes from realizing money can't fix everything. "What's the delay?" he demanded. "Why is the kitchen staff in my son's room?" "Sir, she was just leaving," a nurse said quickly. "She was just leaving?" Richard's gaze landed on Aisha like a physical weight. He didn't look at her, he looked through her. Like she was furniture. Like she was less than furniture. "You're a waitress. You carry trays. You don't speak. You don't think. You stay in your lane." He turned to security. "Get her out." Aisha opened her mouth to respond, but movement caught her eye. Claire Whitmore, standing in the corner, her silk nightgown wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. For one moment, maybe two, their eyes met. And Aisha saw something flicker in Claire's expression. Recognition. Doubt. The smallest crack in the wall of wealth and status that separated them. But Claire said nothing. She looked away. And that silence would cost more than anyone in that room could possibly imagine. Security Chief Tom Briggs materialized beside Aisha like he had been waiting for exactly this moment. His hand closed around her arm, not violent, just absolute. The grip of a man who had removed hundreds of inconvenient people from inconvenient places. "Let's go. I'm telling you there's something wrong with that room. And I'm telling you to walk." He marched her down the hallway, past the kitchen staff who suddenly found their shoes very interesting, past the other servers who pretended to be folding napkins, past a world that had taught all of them the same brutal lesson. Don't make noise. Don't make trouble. Don't make yourself a target. At the front door, Briggs released her arm. "Your final check will be mailed." "I don't want a check," Aisha said. "I want someone to check that room." Briggs smiled. Not kindly. "What you want doesn't matter here. It never did." He started to close the door, but then Aisha heard it. Dr. Keller's voice, low and controlled, coming from somewhere behind her in the foyer. Make sure she signs the NDA before she leaves the property. Pause. And if she doesn't? Another pause. Longer this time. Then she doesn't leave calmly. The door closed in Aisha's face. She stood on the front steps of a $30 million mansion, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Not because of the threat, she had survived worse. But because of what it meant. This wasn't a medical team fighting to save a dying baby. This was a machine protecting itself. And machines like this didn't make threats unless they had something to hide. The question that would haunt her for weeks had already taken root. What don't they want me to know? If this story is already satisfying you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what happens next will make you absolutely furious. By sunrise, the Whitmore mansion had transformed into a fortress. Eleanor Shaw arrived in a black sedan at exactly 6:30 a.m., heels clicking against the driveway, tablet glowing in her manicured hands, smile so polished it could cut glass. She was introduced to the staff as Crisis Communications Coordinator, but everyone knew what that really meant. Fixer. Cleaner. The person you called when the truth needed to disappear. Within 3 hours, Eleanor had implemented what she called standard protective protocols. Every personal phone was confiscated. Every staff member was reminded, firmly, of the non-disclosure agreements they had signed upon employment. Every exterior door was recoded to new pins that only security personnel possessed. A maid whispered to a gardener during a brief moment alone, "What happened to that African woman? The one from the kitchen?" The gardener didn't look up from his work. Same thing that happens to everyone who talks too much around here. She became a problem. Now she's gone. But Aisha wasn't gone. Not yet. She sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, a clean but cramped studio she had called home for 2 years, with a phone in one hand and a notebook in the other. 3 numbers were written on the page. Child Protective Services. St. Augustine Hospital Board. Channel 7 News tip line. She called CPS first. Got transferred 4 times. Spent 20 minutes on hold listening to a recording about unprecedented call volumes. Finally, a tired voice answered. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but without documentation of abuse or neglect, actual documentation, we can't intervene in a private medical situation involving licensed physicians. But the baby keeps crashing only in that room. Doesn't that seem?" "Ma'am, are you a medical professional?" "No, but..." "Then I'm not sure what you expect us to do. Have a good day." Click. She called the hospital board next. Got a receptionist who took her information with the enthusiasm of someone filling out a parking ticket. "We'll take your concern under advisement and forward it to the appropriate committee." "How long will that take?" "These things take time, ma'am. Proper channels. Due process. A baby could die." "I understand. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Click. She called the news last. A young producer answered, sounding genuinely interested, until he asked the question that ended the conversation. "Do you have video? Photos? Medical records? Anything documented?" Aisha closed her eyes. "I have what I saw. What I smelled." A long pause. "Look, I believe you believe something is wrong. But without evidence we can't run a story accusing a billionaire of... what, exactly? Inadequate ventilation? I'm sorry. Call us back if you get something concrete." Click. Aisha set the phone down. She was one woman with no proof, no power, and no way back inside. But she had been one woman with nothing before. In Lagos, when she was 17, when the factory owner said her cousin's death was an accident, and threatened her family if they pursued it further. She had been powerless then too. And she had promised herself she would never be that powerless again. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Dr. Keller was putting on the performance of his career. He stood before Richard and Claire in the nursery, his voice warm with carefully manufactured hope. "We've identified the issue. A rare inflammatory marker, so rare it doesn't show up on standard panels. But I've consulted with colleagues at Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic, and we're implementing an experimental infusion protocol. Cutting edge. Only available at 3 hospitals in the entire country." Claire's hands flew to her mouth. "It's going to work?" Dr. Keller smiled, the kind of smile that had reassured hundreds of wealthy families, the kind of smile that belonged on a billboard. "Mrs. Whitmore, I give you my word. Your son is going to be fine." Within hours the baby stabilized. Color returned to his pale cheeks. The monitors stopped their frantic screaming and settled into steady rhythmic beeps. The nurses began to smile. The specialists began to congratulate each other. Richard Whitmore shook Dr. Keller's hand for a full 30 seconds, his eyes wet with tears he would later deny. Claire wept openly, relief flooding out of her like a dam breaking. Everyone in that room believed they had just witnessed a miracle. No one thought to ask why Dr. Keller's smile never quite reached his eyes. Or why Eleanor Shaw was already on her phone in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones about accelerated timelines and containment protocols. That night there was a knock at Aisha's door. She approached carefully, she had learned caution the hard way, but when she opened it, no one was there. Just an envelope on the worn welcome mat. Inside was a single piece of paper. Handwritten. 4 words that changed everything. You're not crazy. Paige. Aisha read it 3 times. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From hope. Paige Monroe. The private nurse. The one who had been standing near the ventilation panel when Aisha first noticed the smell. The one whose expression had flickered with something like recognition before Dr. Keller shut everything down. Someone inside saw what Aisha saw. Someone inside was willing to risk everything to say so. Nurse Paige Monroe had worked for wealthy families for 8 years. She knew the unwritten rules better than anyone. See nothing, say nothing, cash the check, and never, under any circumstances, make yourself a problem. But that smell hadn't left her mind. Every time she entered the nursery it was there. Faint but persistent. Sweet but wrong. And every time the baby crashed it happened in that room. Nowhere else. Just that room. The next morning, while Eleanor was locked in a conference call and security was rotating shifts, Paige made her decision. She slipped into the nursery's utility closet. Found the ventilation panel, sealed, painted over like it had never been meant to be opened. She pulled out her phone, hit record and whispered into the camera. This is Paige Monroe. The date is March 15th. I'm recording because I believe there's something wrong with the ventilation system in the Whitmore nursery, and I believe it's making the baby sick. She wedged a screwdriver under the panel's edge and pried. It came loose with a crack. And behind it, behind the fresh paint and the sealed edges, was something that made her blood run cold. Black growth spreading across damp insulation. Mold so thick it looked like it was breathing. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, it's... A hand clamped down on her shoulder. She spun around. Dr. Keller stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Stop recording, Paige. Dr. Keller, you need to see this. The contamination is... I said stop recording. She didn't stop. This baby is being poisoned. Right here in this room. We have to. Dr. Keller moved faster than she expected. His hand closed around her phone. You're hysterical, he said calmly. You've been working too many hours. I'm going to recommend you take some time off. Immediately. You can't. I can't. And I will. He turned to the doorway where Tom Briggs had materialized like a shadow. Please escort Nurse Monroe to her quarters. She'll be leaving the property within the hour. Paige's video would last 11 more seconds, captured in fragments showing glimpses of struggle, muffled voices, the ceiling spinning, before it cut to black. And then Paige Monroe would disappear. The next morning, Aisha tried to reach Paige. No answer. She called the mansion staff coordinator, pretending to be a concerned cousin. Oh, Paige. The coordinator's voice was breezy, practiced. She resigned yesterday. Personal reasons. Very sudden. She didn't leave any forwarding information. Aisha's throat tightened. She didn't even say goodbye to anyone? Some people don't. Pause. Is there anything else? Aisha hung up without answering. She had lived through enough to know the difference between someone who left and someone who was taken. Paige hadn't left. Paige had found something. And now Paige was gone. That night, Aisha made a decision that would either save a baby's life or destroy her own. At 11:40 p.m., she scaled the service gate on the mansion's east side. She had done harder climbs in Lagos, running from situations she didn't let herself think about anymore. The motion sensors had a blind spot near the gardener's shed. She had noticed it during her weeks working inside. The security rotation had a 4-minute gap between shifts. 4 minutes. That was all she had. She found the trash bins near the service exit, the ones the kitchen staff used for disposal runs. And there, wedged between garbage bags like someone had thrown it away in a hurry, was Paige's phone. Screen cracked. Battery at 3%. Aisha grabbed it. A flashlight blinded her. Don't move. Tom Briggs stepped out of the shadows, 2 more guards flanking him. Before Aisha could react, she was face down in the grass, Briggs's knee pressing into her back, his breath hot against her ear. You think you're clever? He hissed. You think you matter? You think anyone is going to believe some immigrant waitress over a family like the Whitmores? He grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back. 1 phone call. That's all it takes. One phone call and you're on a plane back to Nigeria tonight. No hearing. No appeal. Just gone. He leaned closer. Is that what you want? Aisha didn't answer. She was too busy thinking about the phone she had managed to slip into her waistband before the lights hit her. The phone that might contain everything Paige had risked her life to record. The phone they didn't know she had. What happens next will show you exactly how far powerful people will go to protect their secrets. And trust me, you're not ready for it. Within 48 hours, Eleanor Shaw earned every penny of her retainer. Aisha's face was everywhere. News sites, social media, local broadcasts. But not as a hero. Not as a whistleblower. As a villain. Disgruntled ex-employee harasses grieving family, one headline read. Terminated kitchen worker accused of stalking billionaire's sick child, read another. Sources, woman demanded money, threatened exposure. The comments were even worse. Deport her. Attention-seeking immigrant. How dare she harass a family during a medical crisis? She should be in prison. Eleanor had built a narrative so clean, so airtight, that the truth didn't stand a chance. Aisha wasn't a concerned witness, she was a bitter ex-employee with an axe to grind. She wasn't trying to save a baby, she was trying to extort a fortune. And the worst part? Aisha couldn't prove otherwise. Paige's phone was locked. Whatever evidence was on it remained trapped behind a 6-digit passcode that Aisha couldn't crack. She had tried birthdays, anniversaries, random combinations. Nothing worked. She was holding proof she couldn't access while the whole world called her a liar. On day 3 the police came. 2 officers at her door. Polite. Professional. Final. Ms. Okoye? We have a warrant for your arrest. Trespassing on private property. Criminal harassment. Making threats. Aisha didn't resist. She knew how this looked. She knew how it would go. Women who looked like her, sounded like her, came from where she came from, they didn't get the benefit of the doubt. They got processed. As they walked her to the squad car, a neighbor watched from an upstairs window. No one said goodbye. But jail gave Aisha something unexpected. Information. She was released after 6 hours. Charges pending review, no formal booking. But while she waited, she met a public defender named Maria Santos who used to work construction litigation. Whitmore Mansion? Maria's eyes narrowed when Aisha mentioned it. That place had a major renovation about 8 months ago. Environmental remediation. Mold abatement. Aisha's heart stopped. Mold? Black mold. Serious infestation. The inspection supposedly passed, but the firm that certified it. Maria laughed bitterly. They're on Richard Whitmore's payroll. Have been for years. They pass whatever he pays them to pass. So the renovation didn't actually fix anything? Who knows? But I can tell you this, if that mold is still there and if that baby has been sleeping in it for months. Maria shook her head. That's not negligence. That's something much worse. Aisha left the jail with a new understanding. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed to protect people like Richard Whitmore and crush people like her. But systems had cracks, and she was going to find them. On day 4 her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Aisha. Claire Whitmore's voice, barely a whisper, trembling like a leaf in a storm. I need you to listen to me. I don't have much time. Claire? What's happening? I found something. In Richard's office. Documents. He knew Aisha. He knew about the mold before the baby was even born. The renovation was never completed, they just sealed everything up and painted over it. The inspection was fake. All of it was. Static. Claire? The line crackled. Aisha heard muffled voices, angry male. Claire, are you there? The call went dead. Aisha tried calling back. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Again. Nothing. 2 things were now certain. Claire Whitmore had woken up. And Claire Whitmore was in danger. The next day, Aisha stood on the courthouse steps after her hearing. Charges reduced to a misdemeanor. Restraining order issued. She couldn't come within 500 feet of the Whitmore property. Her reputation was in ruins, her face was all over the internet as a cautionary tale about obsessed employees, and she had exactly $47 in her bank account. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Tom Briggs stepped out, holding a manila folder. You got lucky today, he said, walking toward her with the casual confidence of a predator who knew his prey couldn't run. But luck runs out. He handed her the folder. Inside, her visa application. Her work history. Her sister's address in Lagos. her sister's nursing license number, her mother's medical records from a clinic in Ikeja. Everything. Say one more word, Briggs said softly, to anyone, a journalist, a lawyer, a stranger on the street, and we bury all of it. Your visa gets revoked. Your sister loses her license. Your mother's treatment gets complicated. He smiled. You came here looking for a better life. Don't let one moment of stupidity take it all away. He got back in the SUV and drove off. Aisha stood on the courthouse steps, holding a folder full of her entire life, and made a decision. She had spent her whole life being told what she couldn't do. Couldn't speak up. Couldn't fight back. Couldn't matter. But a baby was dying. And she was the only one who knew why. Some things were worth more than safety. The parking structure was nearly empty at 1:15 a.m. One flickering light. The smell of oil and concrete. The kind of place where secrets were exchanged and deals were made. A single headlight flashed. Claire Whitmore's car. Aisha approached slowly, every nerve in her body screaming that this was a trap. But Claire stepped out of the driver's seat looking like a woman who had already lost everything. Hair unwashed, eyes hollow, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the documents she carried. They're going to blame me, Claire said without preamble. If this goes public, if our son dies, Richard has already talked to the lawyers. Unstable mother. Interfered with treatment. Refused medical advice. He's building a case to make me the villain so he can walk away clean. She shoved a folder into Aisha's hands. A maintenance log. A keycard. A sealed envelope. The log shows exactly when the nursery ventilation was sealed over, 3 days after the renovation was supposed to be complete. The keycard will get you through the service entrance. And this, she pressed a business card into Aisha's palm, is the journalist Paige was trying to contact before she disappeared. Narration. Investigative reporter. She knows something's wrong. She just needs proof. Aisha looked at the keycard. You're helping me break in? I'm helping you save my son. Claire's voice cracked. I don't care what happens to me anymore. I don't care what happens to Richard. I don't care about the money or the reputation or any of it. I just want my baby to breathe. She got back in her car. Tomorrow night. 8 p.m. Richard is doing a press conference. Eleanor's idea, get ahead of the story, control the narrative. The whole staff will be focused on the front of the house. You'll have maybe 10 minutes. Claire. Don't thank me. Claire's eyes were wet. I should have listened to you that first night. I should have spoken up. Every day I didn't, my son got sicker. She started the engine. Some sins you can't apologize for. You can only try to fix them. She drove away. Aisha stood alone in the parking structure, holding everything she needed to bring down a billionaire. Tomorrow, one way or another, this ended. At 8 p.m. the following evening, Richard Whitmore stood behind a podium in front of his mansion, flanked by Eleanor Shaw and Dr. Grant Keller. Camera lights blazed. Reporters jostled for position. The narrative was already written. All Richard had to do was read it. Our family has faced an unimaginable tragedy, he began, his voice heavy with rehearsed grief. A rare genetic condition. Undetectable by standard screening. We have spent millions pursuing every possible treatment, consulted with the finest medical minds in the country, and upstairs, Aisha slipped through the service entrance. Her heart was pounding so loud she was certain the security cameras could hear it. But Claire had been right. Every guard, every staff member, every pair of eyes in the mansion was focused on the spectacle out front. She reached the nursery. Pulled out Paige's phone, finally unlocked after Sarah Chen's tech contact had worked on it for 6 hours straight. The cracked screen glowed to life. She hit live. My name is Aisha Okoye, she said into the camera. 3 weeks ago, I was fired from this house for asking one question. Tonight, I'm going to show you why. She crossed to the ventilation panel, the one that had been sealed and painted over, the one that had killed Paige's career and nearly killed a baby. She pried it open. The black contamination spread across the wall like a disease, thick, wet, undeniable. Toxic mold that had been growing for months while 14 doctors searched for explanations everywhere except the obvious place. This baby has been sleeping in poison, Aisha said, holding the phone steady. And everyone in this house knew. Downstairs, someone noticed the notification. Then someone else. Then someone else. Within 60 seconds, 30,000 people were watching. Within 90 seconds, the press conference fell apart. Richard's face went white. Eleanor grabbed his arm. Dr. Keller was already backing toward the door. And then security burst into the nursery. Turn that off. Dr. Keller shouted, lunging for the phone. This woman is mentally unstable. She's trespassing. Aisha held her ground. I'm showing the world what you tried to hide. Tom Briggs grabbed her arm. 2 guards moved to block the door. And then Claire Whitmore appeared in the doorway. Let her speak. Richard spun around. Claire, what are you? I said let her speak. It was the first time in 15 years of marriage that Claire Whitmore had raised her voice to her husband. The first time she had chosen truth over comfort. The first time she had stood in the gap between power and justice and refused to move. Security hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Authorities arrived within the hour. If this story moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Aisha's position. Would you have risked everything? Would you have walked away? 3 weeks later, the Whitmore case was the only thing anyone could talk about. Dr. Grant Keller's medical license was suspended pending a full investigation by the state medical board. 14 families he had treated over the past decade had already filed requests for case reviews. Eleanor Shaw's documents were seized by federal prosecutors. She was cooperating fully, which, in legal terms, meant she was giving up everyone above her to save herself. Richard Whitmore's company stock plummeted 47% in a single week. The board of directors forced him out. His face, once synonymous with American success, now appeared exclusively in stories about corporate negligence and criminal cover-ups. Paige Monroe was found in a private psychiatric facility upstate, admitted under a false name, sedated for acute anxiety disorder. It took 3 lawyers and a court order to get her released. Her recovery would take months, maybe years. But she was alive. She was free. And her testimony would be the centerpiece of the criminal trial. Claire Whitmore filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning. She moved to her sister's house in Vermont with the baby, who was finally truly recovering now that he was breathing clean air. She didn't do interviews. She didn't make statements. She simply disappeared into a life that didn't include mansions or NDAs or men who valued reputation over their own child. The baby survived. After everything, the cover-ups, the threats, the silencing, the machinery of wealth deployed to protect a lie, the baby survived. Aisha Okoye went back to work. Different house. Different family. Same trays, same uniforms, same invisible labor that kept wealthy homes running while the people who lived in them never learned her name. But something had changed. On her 3rd day at the new job, a young maid, barely 20, fresh from Guatemala, still learning English, spilled a glass of wine on an antique carpet. The girl's face went white with terror. She started apologizing frantically, bracing herself for the explosion she had learned to expect. Aisha caught her arm. Gently. It's okay, she said. It's just a carpet. It can be cleaned. And if anyone tells you otherwise, she looked the girl directly in the eyes, you come find me. Because you're allowed to make mistakes here. And you're allowed to speak. The girl looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted behind her eyes. Recognition. Oh. The smallest crack in a wall of fear. She nodded. Aisha went back to work. Late at night, when the house was quiet and she was alone with her thoughts, she could still hear Richard Whitmore's voice echoing off those marble floors. Get out of my house. She had gotten out. But she made sure they never forgot the woman they tried to silence. And somewhere in Vermont, in a small room in a quiet house, a baby was breathing. That's where we end today's story. If you made it this far, you're part of a special community that believes in truth, courage, and the power of one voice to change everything. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the next time someone tells you to stay in your lane, ask yourself what they're trying to hide. Until next time.